What an interesting election. Ian, let's start with
Yeah,
you.
well, this is an election like no other I've ever seen in 50 years of watching elections. The Conservatives, a month before the call, were 25 points ahead, and today they're either even or 5 points behind, depending on your polls. And older voters who have traditionally voted conservative in every election I've been in are all voting liberal this time. We could always count on the older voters to be on the red side. And the young voters who have always in our other elections either voted NDP or liberal are all voting conservative. Not all, but a majority voting conservative. And the final thing is the NDP collapse.
Yeah.
They had 21% of the polls or of the vote before the election, just like the conservatives were way up. They're now down to 9%, which means they're going to lose some of their 25 seats. They might even lose their party status. And the reason is fear of Trump.
Mhm.
And it was used by Ford quite successfully in his reelection, and it's a one trip pony as far as Carney is concerned. Even today, he called a meeting an unnecessary meeting to discuss the non-tariffs that were not imposed on Canada.
Cody, what do you think? What do you think of what's going on? There's a
I
lot.
think, yeah, there's a lot.
Like
This is
Ian
where,
said, the NDP is collapsing. The Liberals have made a comeback like no other party has seen before. And what's happening with the Conservatives? Are they status quo or are they losing?
well, here's the thing. I don't think that the Conservatives are necessarily running a terrible campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that they're not winning. So two things can be true at once, and I really think that, but where Pierre was at the beginning of this race, before it even started, he was cruising to a supermajority.
Yeah.
That's just not the case anymore. This is a much more competitive race, and like just looking at it from a pure political standpoint, I think the biggest stories of this election, after this election is over, it's gonna be about the resurgence of the Liberals, how they've been able to, if you believe the polls or whatever, which we'll talk about,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm really struggling to find the silver lining for the Conservatives in all of these numbers, because I mean, if the election were held today, it's a Liberal majority, Liberal minority at the least.
Yeah.
The Bloc Québécois, they're doing terrible in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
The NDP, like, they're not even a choice in this election. It's a binary choice between the Conservatives and the Liberals. There are two issues in this economy, the economy and Donald Trump. And based on whatever is your top issue, that you're going to vote accordingly.
And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording that, you know what, when there's such a huge threat to the economy, such as these tariffs that keep, getting put on and removed, and, he changes the number whenever he wants, it's almost like that threat is so much bigger than our regular economic concerns, that the leader who is going to win that conversation is going to dominate in the election, because it's almost like, there's there's a huge crisis that's coming your way. And yeah, of course you had problems before, and there's things you didn't like, and there's a higher crime rate, and the grocery prices. There's been a lot of issues that people don't like in Canada over the past 9 years. A lot of that's been blamed on the Trudeau government, on the Liberals, but now there's a bigger crisis, and the question is, who can handle this crisis better? And unfortunately, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Pierre took way too long to start talking about Trump, to start talking about the bigger conversation. So I think you're right about that. What do you think of the NDP? What is happening to the NDP?
Well, their biggest problem right now, politically, just purely by the numbers, is their incumbents are in real danger.
Yeah.
And they are similar to what happened in the provincial election. The NDP, at one point, they were in danger.
Mm-hmm.
But they did the smart thing, and they focused their resources on saving their incumbents.
Yeah.
And because of that, Merritt Stiles retained her position as the official opposition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how Jagmeet Singh stays on as the leader for very long after this. He might even lose his own seat.
Yeah.
The problem is progressives,
Mm-hmm.
including in Quebec, which a lot of them would drift between the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals. They're all the left is coalescing behind the Liberals.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that the reason why I don't think that the Conservatives are running a bad campaign is because their numbers are actually pretty freaking good. They're just not winning.
Yeah.
On any ordinary election, when you're at 38 to 40%, even those high 30s, that's a pretty big conservative, or not a pretty big, but it's a conservative win.
Yeah.
The problem is the opposition is not split, which is what Doug Ford has been benefiting from for the past years that he's been in power.
Yeah.
So that's like the NDP, they're so screwed it's not even funny.